Dr. Elena Vasquez had always loved looking at the stars. Ever since she was a little girl, she remembered sitting in her backyard with a small old telescope, staring at the night sky and wondering what else might be out there. Her parents often joked that she spent more time with the stars than with people, but for Elena, the stars were not just beautiful, they were a mystery that called to her, whispering secrets she was determined to uncover. She had worked for years at the remote observatory on the edge of the desert, far away from city lights, where the sky was dark and the stars shone like diamonds. The observatory was a quiet, lonely place, but it was perfect for someone who wanted to listen to the universe on a late evening. Elena was sitting at her station monitoring signals from distant parts of the galaxy. It was a night like many others, calm and silent except for the hum of machines. She sipped her lukewarm coffee and adjusted the dials on the radio telescope, scanning the same familiar regions of space that had never produced anything unusual. Suddenly, something strange appeared on the screen. At first she thought it was interference, a glitch in the machine, or even some random noise from a distant star. But as she stared, the pattern repeated itself, clearly organized and very deliberate. Her heart began to race. She double-checked everything, restarted the equipment, ran the numbers again, even called a colleague for verification. The pattern was real and it was unlike anything she had ever seen. Elena realized she was looking at a message. Not just random signals, but something that seemed almost like a language, a simple SOS signal, but much more complex than the emergency beacons humans used. It was coming from a star system many light years away. The idea that she might be witnessing communication from another civilization made her both excited and nervous. She could feel the weight of the discovery pressing down on her. One signal could change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe forever. She knew she had to handle it carefully. The first thing Elena did was inform her superiors. She wrote a detailed report, including the coordinates of the signal, the frequency, and the unusual pattern she had detected. She emphasized that this could be a genuine attempt at communication or, just as likely, a natural phenomenon that looked like a signal. Still, her instincts told her this was different. She couldn't shake the feeling that something alive and intelligent was on the other end, reaching out for help. When her report reached the top scientists and government officials, reactions varied. Some were thrilled, imagining the excitement of first contact. Others were cautious, worried that humanity might be walking into danger without knowing it. Soon, the story leaked to a select group of journalists. Speculation began immediately. Was this really aliens? Was it a trap? Could this signal mean humanity was about to meet beings far more advanced than themselves? The public reaction was intense, with some people celebrating the possibility of extraterrestrial life and others panicking at the thought of a potential threat. Social media exploded with theories, ranging from scientific analysis to wild conspiracy ideas. Governments felt pressure to respond, and military agencies started monitoring the skies closely. The signal, which at first seemed like a curiosity, had quickly become a global concern. Elena continued to work tirelessly, analyzing every aspect of the transmission. She noticed subtle patterns within the SOS signal, patterns that suggested urgency and fear. The message seemed to contain not just coordinates but information about the source's environment. It spoke of instability, danger, and desperation. Elena was careful to remain objective, but she couldn't help feeling empathy for the unknown beings sending this message. Somewhere out there, life was in trouble, and they had turned to humans in the hope of receiving help. The idea was almost overwhelming. She tried to imagine what it must be like to be that far from home, alone in the vastness of space, reaching out to an entirely different species, hoping for a response. As the news spread among governments, debates erupted about how to respond. Some officials argued that humanity should answer the call with caution, sending scientific probes or carefully crafted messages. Others feared that replying could attract attention from something dangerous. They questioned whether humanity had the right to interfere in an alien crisis. Was it ethical to respond, or would it put Earth in danger? These questions led to heated discussions in conference rooms around the world. Military generals, politicians, and scientists argued late into the night, each aware that their decisions could have consequences that reached far beyond anything they had experienced. The tension was palpable, and every decision felt like balancing on the edge of a knife. Meanwhile, ordinary people were experiencing the story in their own ways. Children stared at the sky, imagining alien friends waving back from distant planets. Adults debated fiercely online, some excited by the possibility of first contact, others fearful of invasion. Religious leaders pondered the implications for faith. Philosophers questioned humanity's place in the universe, and scientists warned that any misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Across the globe, people felt the stirrings of history unfolding. This was a moment unlike any other, where the ordinary routines of life were suddenly connected to the vast, mysterious universe in ways that seemed almost impossible to comprehend. Back at the observatory, Elena found herself caught between excitement and fear. She knew that she had discovered something extraordinary, but she also understood the danger that came with it. Humanity was at a crossroads. Every decision made now could determine whether Earth would approach this moment with curiosity and caution or with panic and aggression. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. She spent long hours staring at the data, analyzing every bit of information, trying to predict what might happen next. Sleep became rare, and coffee became her constant companion. Yet, despite the exhaustion, she felt a strange exhilaration. She was witnessing history in real time. In the background, international organizations started coordinating responses. Space agencies shared data, hoping to validate Elena's findings. Military organizations quietly mobilized defenses in case the signal indicated an imminent threat. Scientists debated the meaning of the patterns in the message. Was it a simple distress call, or a warning about danger that humanity could not yet perceive? Some argued that the signal's complexity suggested a highly advanced civilization, far beyond human technology. Others cautioned that humans might be misinterpreting the information entirely. In every corner of the scientific and political world, minds were working frantically to understand and respond. Elena's team worked around the clock, developing models to understand the alien environment described in the SOS signal. They attempted to simulate the conditions the senders were experiencing, hoping to figure out what kind of help they might need. Every detail in the signal became critically important. Small errors in interpretation could lead to disastrous consequences. They discussed whether to send a simple acknowledgement or a more detailed message. Some argued that any response should be encoded in a universal language of mathematics, while others believed emotions or symbols might be more understandable. The debate was intense, but all agreed on one thing: this was the first real opportunity for humanity to communicate with intelligent life beyond Earth. As the night stretched into days, Elena found herself reflecting on the enormity of the moment. She remembered her childhood dreams of finding life in the stars, the countless hours of study, and the quiet nights in the observatory. Now, those dreams were no longer just imagination, they were reality. Yet, alongside the wonder, she felt fear. What if humanity's response was too aggressive or too slow? What if they misunderstood the message and created conflict where none was intended? The thought was terrifying, and she felt the weight of every person on Earth who would be affected by her work. Eventually, Elena realized that this moment would define her career and possibly humanity's future. She worked carefully to create a plan for sharing the information responsibly, balancing the need for public knowledge with the dangers of panic. The signal, once just a mysterious pattern in the night sky, had become a symbol of hope, fear, and responsibility. It reminded humanity that the universe was vast and that life might exist beyond the familiar, comfortable boundaries of Earth. And most importantly, it reminded them that the choices they made in response to this moment could shape the course of history. As the observatory's lights flickered in the quiet desert night, Elena continued her vigil. She monitored the signal, calculated responses, and prepared for the world's reaction. Somewhere out there, someone or something had reached out for help, and somewhere down here, humans had to decide whether to answer, to approach with curiosity, or to retreat in fear. The first step had been taken, and the consequences were only beginning to unfold. In this quiet, lonely observatory, Elena understood that life on Earth was about to change forever. The moment humanity realized that the signal was more than a simple distress call, the world shifted. The initial excitement among scientists and curious citizens quickly transformed into a mixture of fear, anxiety, and urgency. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had first discovered the SOS signal, watched as the implications of her discovery began to ripple across the globe. She had always dreamed of discovering extraterrestrial life, but she had never imagined it would come with such immediate and frightening consequences. This was no longer a theoretical scenario discussed in classrooms or science journals. It was real, and it was demanding humanity's full attention. Governments across the world reacted differently, but the overall tone was one of alarm. Some nations immediately began mobilizing their military forces, interpreting the signal as a warning of an approaching threat. Military analysts had pored over the patterns in the SOS message and noticed something alarming. Embedded within the message were details, suggesting that the beings sending the SOS were being hunted or pursued by something else. This wasn't just a call for help, it was a desperate plea for survival. Analysts warned that if such a predator could locate and track another civilization, Earth could be next. This assessment triggered immediate defense protocols. Fighter jets were placed on high alert, missile systems were checked and rechecked, and satellite monitoring intensified. Humanity was waking up to the reality that their own survival could soon be at stake. Public reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. News networks broadcasted the story around the clock, showing experts analyzing the SOS signal, images of observatories, and footage of military bases preparing for the worst. Social media exploded with theories and speculations. Some people were thrilled by the idea that humans might finally make contact with intelligent life beyond Earth. Others were terrified, imagining alien predators or invasions. Panic spread in cities, towns, and villages. Some people rushed to stock up on supplies, while others questioned whether governments were hiding the truth. The uncertainty and fear of the unknown became a powerful force. changing the way people thought about their daily lives. Life seemed suddenly fragile and unpredictable. As the tension rose, Dr. Vasquez continued her work with a renewed sense of responsibility. She understood that the SOS signal could be a genuine plea from a civilization in grave danger. But she also knew that any wrong interpretation could trigger a catastrophic response. Scientists worked tirelessly to decode every part of the message, attempting to understand the alien environment and the potential threat described within. They used advanced computer models to simulate the situation, trying to predict what kind of danger might be approaching. They shared their findings with governments, but even among the best minds, uncertainty remained. The universe was vast, and humanity's knowledge of it was limited. Every assumption came with risk. Meanwhile, military leaders around the world were preparing for every possible scenario. They knew that if the threat described in the signal was real, Earth might not have a second chance. Entire fleets of ships and aircraft were repositioned, and defense networks were put on maximum alert. Some leaders argued for extreme measures intercepting any approaching spacecraft before it reached Earth, launching preemptive strikes, and preparing for mass evacuation. Others counseled caution, warning that overreaction could provoke conflict or destroy the opportunity for peaceful communication. The debates were intense, and there was little time to make decisions. Humanity was moving at a pace faster than ever before, driven by fear and survival instinct. The media added another layer of tension. Journalists, eager for exclusive stories, reported on every possible detail, often exaggerating the danger to capture public attention. Headlines screamed of alien threat approaching Earth and humanity on the brink of interstellar war. Social media amplified these messages, and conspiracy theories flourished. Some groups believed that the signal was a trap, designed to lure humans into a dangerous situation. Others believed that the aliens were desperate refugees, harmless and in need of help. The conflicting narratives created confusion and anxiety, leaving many people uncertain about what was real and what was speculation. This fear was contagious, spreading like wildfire across the globe. Amid all this chaos, ordinary people reacted in ways both inspiring and alarming. In some towns, neighbors came together to discuss survival plans, forming volunteer patrols and community defenses. In other places, panic led to looting, clashes, and irrational behavior. The presence of an unknown, possibly dangerous force somewhere in the universe brought out both the best and worst in humanity. People realized that their previous concerns, the routine stresses of life, work, and politics, paled in comparison to this new, overwhelming reality. Humanity's primal survival instincts, long dormant in a time of peace, were awakening rapidly, and no one could ignore them. Dr. Vasquez often reflected on this awakening. She knew that fear was natural, but she worried about what humanity might do in response to uncertainty. The SOS signal had unintentionally forced humans to confront their own survival instincts, pushing them into an aggressive, highly defensive mode. The term Deathworlder response had begun to circulate among analysts and journalists. The description of the way humanity reacted to extreme existential threats with maximum force and vigilance. This was the same instinct that had helped humans survive countless natural disasters and wars throughout history. But now, it was being applied on a global, interstellar scale. Humanity was preparing to defend itself against a threat that it barely understood. Yet the entire planet was united in action. In the observatory, Alina felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. She had discovered the signal, but she was also witnessing the consequences of that discovery. Governments were coordinating complex response strategies, military operations were in motion, and millions of people were preparing for potential catastrophe. Every new piece of information from the signal sparked intense debate and rapid decision-making. The pressure was immense, but Alina knew that her work could make a difference. She had to help ensure that humanity responded intelligently, rather than simply reacting out of fear. Her role as both a scientist and a mediator became crucial. She needed to translate the alien signal into something humans could understand without provoking unnecessary panic. Scientific teams around the world collaborated like never before. Communication channels that had previously been competitive were now open and cooperative. Data was shared openly, models were refined, and simulations were run constantly to predict possible outcomes. The SOS signal became the focal point of a global scientific effort. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of purpose and unity. Humanity had a common goal: to survive and to understand. This unprecedented collaboration showed the best side of human nature. Even as the darker side, the fear, paranoia, and suspicion loomed in the background. As time passed, the urgency increased. The SOS signal continued to transmit, offering more information and subtle clues about the danger approaching the alien civilization. Analysts detected signs that the threat was closing in and that the aliens were desperate. If they did not receive help soon, their situation could become catastrophic. This realization added urgency to humanity's response. The global community could not wait for perfect information or clear instructions. Decisions had to be made quickly, and the consequences were enormous. Every action carried risk, but inaction was even more dangerous. Humanity had to act decisively. Amid all this preparation and tension, Everyday life continued in strange ways. People went about their routines with a heightened sense of awareness. Schools discussed space, survival, and ethics in lessons. Workplaces adjusted schedules to account for emergency drills. Families talked late into the night about what they would do if the threat reached Earth. Life had not stopped, but it had changed fundamentally. Fear and hope existed side by side, shaping every decision, conversation, and action. Humanity was no longer just living on Earth, it was standing at the edge of the universe, aware that its actions might have consequences far beyond the planet. Elena found herself in the center of it all. She became a point of contact between scientists, government officials, and the media. She had to explain the signal clearly, emphasize the risks, and help guide the response without causing panic. Every day was filled with high-stakes decisions, long hours, and constant pressure. She felt both exhilarated and exhausted. Yet, despite the stress, she remained determined. This was the moment she had trained for her entire life. Humanity's survival and, perhaps its first meaningful contact with an alien civilization, depended on careful, intelligent action. She could not afford to make mistakes. The world had already begun its transformation. Fear and survival instincts had pushed humanity into a fully mobilized state. Scientists, militaries, and civilians alike were on high alert. Cities, towns, and rural areas prepared defenses. Governments debated strategies. Media outlets amplified tensions. Social media spread both hope and panic. Humanity's Deathworlder response, the instinct to act with maximum caution, aggression, and survival focus was in full force. Every step taken, every decision made, would shape the future, and nobody could be sure what the outcome would be. Humanity had taken its first real step into a new era. The SOS signal had shifted from a mysterious curiosity to an urgent call that demanded action. The alien plea for help had triggered fear, planning, coordination, and survival instincts on an unprecedented global scale. Humanity had awakened to the reality of the cosmos, and with that awakening came both danger and opportunity. The stage was set for the next phase, the point where struggle, conflict, and heroism would begin to define how humans responded to a universe far bigger and more complex than they had ever imagined. The signal from the distant star system had changed everything. Humanity was no longer just curious about life in the universe, it was being forced to act. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had discovered the mysterious SOS signal, now found herself at the center of an unprecedented global effort. Scientists, military leaders, governments, and ordinary citizens were all mobilizing, each trying to understand and respond to the situation. The sense of urgency had shifted into full-scale preparation, and the world felt like it had been transformed overnight as the days passed. Humanity's response became increasingly complex. Governments and militaries around the world were coordinating their efforts like never before. Military exercises were being run in secret. Defensive systems were tested and expanded, and communication networks were secured to prevent panic. Nations that had often been rivals were sharing data, pooling resources, and cooperating in ways that were almost unimaginable just weeks earlier. The SOS signal had united humanity in a way that no single event had ever done before. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of purpose. For the first time in history, humans were preparing to face an unknown threat together. Dr. Vasquez worked tirelessly, analyzing the alien signal for any clues about the danger approaching the SOS senders. Her team tried to decipher the patterns in the message, looking for information about the aliens' environment, technology, and needs. Every detail mattered, because misunderstanding the signal could lead to disastrous mistakes. She spent long hours at the observatory, often losing track of time, as she decoded complex sequences of numbers and symbols. Each breakthrough brought new insights, but also new questions. The more she learned, the more she realized how little humanity truly understood about life beyond Earth. The aliens were advanced, intelligent, and clearly in danger, but their technology and ways of thinking were completely unfamiliar. While scientists worked to understand the message, militaries began preparing for worst-case scenarios. Defense plans included everything from intercepting unknown spacecraft to preparing emergency evacuation routes for major cities. Military leaders feared that if the SOS senders were being hunted by a dangerous force, that force might eventually reach Earth. They assumed the aliens might not survive without intervention, and that humanity might become a target simply by existing in nearby space. This mindset led to a heightened state of alert, with forces stationed strategically around the globe, ready to act at a moment's notice. It was a tense and anxious time. The world was on edge, and even small mistakes could trigger catastrophe. Public reaction was equally intense. People were both fascinated and terrified. News broadcasts described the alien SOS and the possible dangers, while social media exploded with theories and speculation. Some people feared that the aliens were dangerous predators themselves, while others believed they were innocent refugees in desperate need of help. Panic began to spread in some areas, with people hoarding supplies, preparing shelters, and discussing survival strategies with neighbors and family members. At the same time, communities came together, helping each other. forming local defense groups, and practicing emergency drills. Humanity's instinct to survive was visible everywhere, in both fear and cooperation. Amid all this, Alina realized how fragile communication could be. Misunderstanding the alien signal could result in humanity acting too aggressively or too passively, both of which could have devastating consequences. She tried to translate the message into terms humans could understand, emphasizing the urgency while warning against overreaction. Every day, she presented her findings to a growing audience of scientists, government officials, and military advisors. The pressure was immense, but she understood that accurate information and calm reasoning were essential. The line between saving lives and causing destruction was real, and she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. That governments and militaries prepared. Ordinary people also began to experience the struggle in tangible ways. Schools held lessons on emergency preparedness, and local authorities organized community safety drills. Families discussed evacuation plans and stockpiled supplies. Some neighborhoods volunteered to help monitor skies and radio signals, hoping to play a small role in a global effort. In cities, the fear of the unknown mingled with excitement. Children imagined friendly aliens, while adults worried about hostile forces. Humanity was living in a constant state of heightened awareness, with every new piece of information about the signal potentially changing plans, decisions, and emotions. Meanwhile, small-scale conflicts and misunderstandings began to appear. Rumors of alien scouts near Earth circulated widely, causing some panic-driven incidents. In a few cases, overzealous citizens or military personnel mistook ordinary satellites or natural phenomena for alien ships, leading to chaos in certain areas. Dr. Vasquez tried to calm fears, explaining that not every unusual signal or object was a threat. She emphasized the importance of patience and careful observation. Even as anxiety continued to rise, humanity was caught between instinctive survival reactions and the need for rational decision, a balance that was difficult to maintain under pressure. Despite the chaos, there were moments of hope and courage. Ordinary people acted heroically, helping neighbors, volunteering for emergency services, and supporting one another in ways that reflected humanity's resilience. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, creating technology to potentially communicate with the aliens or assist them in their struggle. Military personnel trained tirelessly, not just for defense, but also to protect life whenever possible. Alina found herself inspired by the determination and dedication of people from all walks of life. Even in fear, humans were showing creativity, cooperation, and compassion, reminder that humanity's response was not only about survival, but also about the kind of civilization they wanted to be. Humanity's struggle took on a deeper dimension. The SOS signal had forced humans to confront not just an external threat, but also their own instincts, fears, and ethical dilemmas. Leaders debated difficult questions. Should they act preemptively, even at the risk of harming innocent life? How much risk was acceptable? Could humanity trust their own judgment when faced with an alien intelligence far beyond human experience? These debates highlighted the tension between survival instincts and moral responsibility, a tension that played out at every level of society. In the observatory, Alina's work became even more crucial. She was now coordinating with teams in other countries, analyzing the signal, comparing interpretations, and advising on potential responses. The SOS message, once a simple call for help, had evolved into a puzzle that could determine humanity's fate. Every decision mattered. A wrong move could provoke conflict, destroy life, or squander an opportunity for peaceful contact. Alina understood that the world was looking to science for answers, even as fear and instinct threatened to dominate. Her role was to provide clarity, guidance, and calm reasoning, a task that demanded both intellect and courage. At the same time, humanity's struggle revealed its vulnerabilities. Panic, misinformation, and uncertainty threatened to undermine even the most carefully planned responses. Civilians sometimes acted impulsively, and some military decisions were influenced more by fear than logic. Humanity was learning, in real time, that facing the unknown required more than weapons or technology. It required discipline, understanding, and restraint. The SOS signal had become a mirror, reflecting both the best and worst of human nature. Fear and aggression existed alongside courage, intelligence, and cooperation, creating a complex, unpredictable response to the crisis. The struggle also highlighted the emotional impact of the situation. People experienced fear, anxiety, and grief, even as they hoped for a positive outcome. Families worried about loved ones in cities that might be targets. Scientists worried about making mistakes in decoding the signal, and leaders worried about global security. The weight of responsibility pressed on everyone. Alina often found herself reflecting on the fragility of human life and the enormity of the universe. The aliens' plight had forced humans to face the reality that survival was never guaranteed, and that even advanced civilizations could be vulnerable. Humanity was struggling not just against external threats, but also against its own limitations and fears. Despite these challenges, progress continued. Scientists made breakthroughs in understanding parts of the SOS message, and military strategies became more coordinated and precise. Communities adapted, finding ways to support one another and maintain morale. Even amid fear, there were moments of triumph, hope, and inspiration. Humanity's struggle was multifaceted, involving not just defense and survival, but also ethics, communication, and empathy. The SOS signal had forced humans to become better versions of themselves, cautious, vigilant, and yet capable of compassion. By the end of this phase, the situation had reached a critical point. Humanity's full struggle was visible: militaries on alert, governments coordinating, scientists decoding signals, and civilians preparing for all possibilities. The SOS signal had catalyzed an extraordinary global response, demonstrating both the strengths and weaknesses of human nature. Survival instincts were heightened, but so were intelligence, creativity, and empathy. Humanity was learning to navigate fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility of first contact. Every action, decision, and thought mattered more than ever. In this phase, the story had shifted from discovery and alarm to preparation and struggle. Humanity was no longer reacting passively. It was actively engaging with the challenge presented by the SOS signal. Fear, hope, cooperation, and courage all intermingled, creating a tense and dynamic environment. Dr. Vasquez and her colleagues stood at the forefront, guiding humanity with knowledge and reasoning, even as instinctive survival behaviors drove aggressive and sometimes chaotic responses. The stage was set for the next phase, where these tensions would culminate in decisive moments of conflict, risk, and critical decisions that could determine humanity's future in the universe. It was clear that humanity's struggle was just beginning. The SOS signal had forced humans to confront the unknown, adapt to unprecedented challenges, and face their own instincts, fears, and limitations. Every person on Earth was touched in some way, directly or indirectly, by the unfolding events. Humanity had learned that survival in a universe filled with unknown threats required more than just technology and strategy. It required wisdom, patience, and courage. The battle between fear and reason, instinct and morality, had become central to humanity's response. And at the heart of it, Dr. Elena Vasquez continued to guide, analyze, and hope, knowing that the coming days would test the best and worst of human nature in ways never imagined before. The day had finally come when humanity would have its first real encounter with the beings that had sent the SOS signal. For weeks, the world had been preparing, debating, and waiting, caught between fear and hope. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent countless hours analyzing the signal, coordinating with international teams, and advising governments and militaries on how to respond. She had hoped that when contact finally occurred, humanity could approach it with reason, caution, and empathy. But as the day progressed, it became painfully clear that fear and instinctive aggression were not so easy to control. The first sightings came at dawn, when unusual objects appeared in Earth's orbit. Satellites and radar systems detected ships unlike anything humans had ever seen. Unlike the sleek and familiar lines of human spacecraft, these alien vessels seemed organic, almost alive. They moved with an eerie precision, hovering and shifting in ways that defied human physics. The military immediately went on high alert, interpreting these unfamiliar movements as potential threats. Fighter jets scrambled, missile defense systems were activated, and bases worldwide braced for impact. Governments issued warnings, asking citizens to remain calm, even as anxiety and fear spread rapidly. Across cities and rural areas alike, Doralina watched the unfolding events with a mixture of awe and dread. She knew the signal had indicated that these beings were fleeing from danger, not seeking to attack Earth, but the military response had already begun, and she feared that human panic might escalate into catastrophe. She tried to communicate with military command, urging caution and advising that these beings should not be assumed hostile. Despite her warnings, misinterpretations and mistrust dominated the decisions being made. The instinct to strike first, to defend Earth at any cost, was deeply ingrained, and it was driving the world toward a confrontation that could have been avoided. The first direct communication attempts began shortly after the alien ships were detected, using patterns derived from the SOS signal. Scientists, including Alina, tried to send messages of reassurance, letting the aliens know that humanity meant no harm. However, the response from the aliens was complicated. Their signals were more advanced and faster than humans could easily decode. Some military officers interpreted the bursts of alien communication as aggressive or deceptive, further escalating tension. There was confusion and fear on both sides. The aliens were trying to signal peaceful intent, while humans, already on edge, read every movement and message as a potential threat. As panic and misinterpretation grew, incidents began to occur. In a few cities, unidentified aerial objects were mistaken for hostile reconnaissance craft. Local defense units engaged prematurely, firing missiles and weapons that unfortunately struck neutral or alien ships attempting to communicate. The world watched in horror as explosions lit the skies, confirming the fears of many and intensifying the global sense of crisis. News broadcasts were filled with images of destruction and chaos, and social media erupted with theories, blame, and fear. Ordinary citizens struggled to understand what was happening, and trust in leadership wavered in the face of such confusion and miscalculation. Despite the chaos, there were also incredible displays of bravery and ingenuity. Scientists and engineers worked frantically to clarify the aliens' intentions and improve communication. Dr. Vasquez led a team that managed to isolate patterns indicating peaceful intent and desperate need for help. They developed clearer signals, visual aids, and mathematical codes that could be understood by both species. These efforts required rapid thinking, technical brilliance, and courage, especially as tensions continued to rise. The success of these communications became critical, because every delay or misunderstanding risked escalating conflict and causing irreversible damage. While communications slowly improved, the human military remained on high alert. Fighter jets patrolled the skies, tracking every movement, and missile defense systems remained active around major cities. Leaders feared that inaction or misjudgment could lead to Earth itself being threatened. In some regions, overzealous troops acted independently, firing on ships they believed were a threat. This uncoordinated aggression created localized chaos, worsening the situation and reinforcing the perception that humanity might be incapable of responding rationally. Alina realized that the true danger was no longer the unknown alien threat, it was human fear, miscommunication, and panic. Amid these tensions, Dr. Vasquez managed to establish a direct, reliable connection with the leaders of the alien fleet. Through weeks of painstaking work, she developed a system that allowed a two-way exchange of information. The aliens revealed that they were refugees, fleeing a hostile predator species that had destroyed their homeworld. They were not a threat to Earth, and their sole goal was survival. Elena relayed this information to the Global Command, emphasizing the urgent need to halt all aggressive actions. She pleaded for restraint, reasoning that misunderstanding could destroy not only the aliens, but also humans themselves. For a moment, there was hope that reason might prevail, but fear was deeply entrenched, and some military leaders remained skeptical. Tensions escalated further when parts of the human fleet, fearing deception, launched a preemptive strike at one of the alien ships. The results were disastrous. Explosions rocked the skies, causing significant casualties among the alien fleet and nearly triggering a wider confrontation. Panic spread among civilians and governments alike, with many believing that war with the aliens had already begun. Alina and her team worked tirelessly to communicate, sending urgent messages, using visual codes, and even coordinating signals that overrode misinterpretations. It was a race against time. If humanity did not succeed in clarifying intentions, the situation could spiral completely out of control. The impact of these early conflicts was not limited to military or governmental domains. Ordinary people were affected in profound ways. Families feared for their lives, cities went into lockdown, and communities tried to prepare for possible attacks. Schools canceled classes, businesses closed, and streets were filled with nervous citizens. The psychological impact of witnessing unfamiliar ships, explosions, and military responses created an environment of extreme stress and anxiety. Despite these challenges, there were also moments of unity and courage. Volunteers assisted in evacuation efforts, scientists supported communication projects, and communities worked together to maintain safety and order. Humanity's struggle was visible in both chaos and cooperation, fear and hope. Dr. Vasquez continued to act as a crucial mediator between the humans and the alien refugees. She worked tirelessly to build trust, translating intentions into a language both species could understand. The aliens were clearly intelligent, emotional, and capable of reasoning, and they responded positively to humanity's attempts at dialogue. Slowly, the military began to recognize the truth of the situation. These beings were not hostile invaders, but desperate refugees. The realization required a sudden shift in strategy, halting aggressive actions and reorienting forces to provide protection rather than attack. Even as relief spread, the scars of misjudgment and unnecessary destruction were evident. That as the breaking moment unfolded, humanity faced a sobering truth. The fear-driven responses that had dominated the early stages of contact had nearly destroyed an opportunity for peaceful engagement. Miscommunication, misinterpretation, and panic had created chaos and loss of life on both sides. The SOS signal, which had started as a plea for help, had nearly triggered catastrophe because humans reacted instinctively, prioritizing defense and aggression over understanding. This realization forced leaders, scientists, and ordinary citizens to reflect on the balance between survival instincts and reason, fear and empathy. Humanity had seen both the danger and the potential of its actions in real time. The immediate threat of uncontrolled conflict had been largely mitigated. The alien leaders, reassured by Elena's careful communication, began to coordinate their movements safely. Human military forces gradually reduced aggression, allowing a fragile peace to take hold. The world, though still tense, began to understand that the alien visitors were not enemies, and that the true risk had been human reaction, rather than extraterrestrial intent. This turning point highlighted the importance of communication, patience, and empathy when facing unknown situations. Humanity had survived the breaking moment, but not without realizing the cost of fear-driven actions and the consequences of jumping to conclusions. The initial encounter with the alien fleet revealed both the dangers of instinctive aggression and the power of reason and collaboration. Dr. Elena Vasquez emerged as a central figure, guiding humanity through chaos and misunderstanding, translating intentions, and helping both sides avoid disaster. The breaking moment was a lesson in restraint, empathy, and the consequences of fear-driven decisions. It set the stage for the final phase, where the world would reflect on its actions, rebuild trust, and attempt to establish a path forward with intelligence, caution, and hope. Humanity had come to the edge of disaster, faced an extraordinary unknown, and survived through communication, coordination, and courage. The first direct contact with an alien civilization had not been peaceful or perfect, but it had offered crucial lessons. Survival required both instinct and intellect. Fear must be balanced with understanding, and even in the face of unprecedented danger, humanity was capable of adaptation, resilience, and empathy. The breaking moment had tested the best and worst of human nature, leaving a world changed forever and preparing it for the next stage of resolution and reflection. The chaos of the first encounter had finally begun to settle, leaving humanity and the alien visitors in a fragile state of truce. The world had been through weeks of fear, uncertainty, and near disaster, and the lessons learned were already reshaping the way humans thought about themselves and the universe. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had guided the delicate communication between the two species, now focused on helping humanity transition from panic and instinctive aggression to careful, thoughtful cooperation. The aliens, having survived the dangerous miscommunications and misunderstandings, were still shaken but relieved to have found refuge. Both species had endured trauma, and the task now was to rebuild trust and begin understanding each other more deeply. In cities across the globe, life slowly began to return to a sense of normalcy, though nothing would ever be the same. People reflected on the events that had unfolded, the panic that had gripped nations, the accidental destruction caused by fear-driven decisions, and the incredible effort that had prevented total catastrophe. Families shared stories of courage, of neighbors helping each other during chaotic moments, and of ordinary people stepping up in ways that had saved lives. The collective memory of the near disaster became a powerful lesson. Humanity's survival instincts were necessary, but they could also be dangerous if not tempered by reason, empathy, and communication. Governments and international organizations faced the enormous challenge of formalizing response to the alien visitors. Policies had to be created quickly to provide safe zones, regulate interactions, and ensure that neither species accidentally harmed the other. Space agencies and military commands worked together to monitor the aliens' movements while keeping Earth safe, striking a balance between protection and cooperation. These efforts required careful diplomacy, scientific insight, and constant vigilance. Leaders had learned that fear and aggression could escalate conflicts unnecessarily, and they were determined not to repeat the mistakes of the first encounter. Dr. Vasquez became a central figure in these efforts. Her expertise in decoding the SOS signal and her experience mediating between humans and aliens made her invaluable. She coordinated teams of scientists, linguists, and engineers to develop communication systems that both species could understand more clearly. This included creating visual symbols, translating mathematical concepts, and even experimenting with universal patterns of sound and light. Every breakthrough brought both species closer to understanding each other, reducing the chance of miscommunication and building a foundation of trust. Elena's work was not just technical, it was also deeply human, requiring patience, empathy, and a constant awareness of how actions could affect both sides. The aliens, though relieved, remained cautious. They had been pursued across space by a dangerous predator, and their instincts for survival were still strong. They observed humans carefully, learning how they communicated, how they responded to stress, and how they organized themselves. Some humans were initially fearful of the aliens' presence, remembering the near misses of the initial encounter, while others were curious and eager to understand their new neighbors. Gradually, as communication improved and mutual understanding grew, both sides began to see each other as intelligent, capable, and worth protecting. Trust was built slowly, brick by brick, through consistent communication and shared experiences. Communities played an important role in this recovery. Across the world, volunteers helped set up safe areas for the aliens, provided resources, and even taught basic Earth customs and languages. Children were particularly fascinated, approaching the visitors with curiosity rather than fear. In classrooms, teachers incorporated lessons about the events, emphasizing not only the science behind the SOS signal and first contact, but also the importance of empathy, patience, and cooperation. Art, music, and storytelling flourished, reflecting humanity's attempt to process the emotional weight of what had happened. The global experience became a catalyst for cultural growth, reminding humans that intelligence and compassion were as important as survival instincts. Dr. Vasquez often reflected on the lessons humanity had learned. The initial Deathworlder response to instinct to act with maximum caution and aggression had nearly caused a disaster. Miscommunication, misinterpretation, and fear-driven reactions had brought humans dangerously close to conflict with beings who only sought help. Yet, humanity had also shown resilience, courage, and ingenuity. Ordinary citizens, scientists, and military personnel had come together to prevent catastrophe. Alina realized that survival in a complex universe required more than instinct. It required careful reasoning, patience, and empathy. These lessons would influence humanity's approach to not only future space exploration but also how they dealt with each other on Earth. Internationally, leaders convened to establish agreements and protocols for future contact. They decided that all communication with extraterrestrial civilizations must be approached with transparency, ethics, and caution. Military forces would be prepared to defend Earth if necessary, but any action would be guided by scientific understanding and verified intentions rather than fear. Policies were created to prevent panic among civilians while maintaining readiness for emergencies. Humanity had learned the hard way that fear-driven aggression could destroy opportunities for cooperation and even threaten its own survival. The SOS incident had become a global wake-up call, forcing people to consider their place in the universe and the responsibilities that came with intelligence and power. Meanwhile, the aliens began to integrate slowly into designated safe zones on Earth. Their technology was advanced, but their biology and needs were different from humans, requiring careful accommodation. Scientists studied their physiology and behavior, while engineers worked on creating environments suitable for their survival. Some humans volunteered to help teach the aliens about Earth, sharing knowledge of human society, culture, and technology. These exchanges were mutually beneficial. Humans learned about alien science and culture, and the aliens gained a better understanding of Earth and its inhabitants. Slowly, both species built a fragile but meaningful relationship based on mutual respect and cooperation. Dr. Vasquez also encouraged the world to reflect on the psychological impact of the events. Communities needed support to process the trauma of fear, destruction, and near-miss. Psychologists and counselors worked alongside scientists to provide guidance and reassurance. Stories of bravery, collaboration, and heroism were shared widely, helping to rebuild trust and morale. Humanity had been tested not only by external threats but also by its own instincts, and part of the recovery involved understanding and controlling those instincts in the future. The SOS incident became both a warning and a lesson, emphasizing that intelligence must be guided by empathy as much as by reason. In the global media, the narrative began to shift from fear to hope. The SOS signal, once a harbinger of panic, became a story of resilience, courage, and interstellar cooperation. Journalists highlighted the successes of scientific teams, the bravery of military personnel who acted responsibly, and the kindness of ordinary citizens who helped aliens in small but meaningful ways. The public learned that fear alone was not a solution, and that careful reasoning, patience, and communication were essential for survival. Humanity had seen the consequences of acting on instinct alone, and the experience became a powerful lesson in humility and wisdom. As weeks turned into months, the aliens and humans gradually built routines and systems to ensure safety, cooperation, and mutual understanding. Joint scientific projects began, exploring new technologies, energy sources, and environmental solutions. Knowledge exchange flourished, and humanity realized that cooperation could lead to advancements previously unimaginable. The SOS signal, which had started as a desperate plea for help, had ultimately become a catalyst for growth, understanding, and collaboration. Both species had survived their first encounter, and both had learned valuable lessons about trust, patience, and the dangers of misunderstanding. Dr. Vasquez continued to play a central role, guiding humanity through this delicate period. She organized conferences, workshops, and communication initiatives, ensuring that lessons learned were integrated into policy and practice. She emphasized that the survival of civilizations depended not only on technology and strategy but also on understanding, empathy, and moral responsibility. The world listened, and slowly, policies, protocols, and public attitudes shifted to reflect this new understanding. Humanity had changed, aware that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and filled with intelligent life that required respect and thoughtful engagement. The final outcome of the SOS encounter was not just the survival of humans and aliens, but the transformation of human perspective. The experience highlighted the dangers of fear-driven action and the value of communication and cooperation. Humanity had nearly made irreversible mistakes, but by combining reason, courage, and empathy, it had avoided catastrophe. The world had learned that survival in the universe required more than instinct, it required intelligence, guided by moral insight. Dr. Vasquez's work ensured that these lessons would not be forgotten, and that future generations would benefit from the wisdom gained during this extraordinary period. The story had come full circle. The SOS signal, once a distant and mysterious plea, had triggered fear, panic, and aggression, but it had also inspired bravery, innovation, and empathy. Humanity had faced its own instincts, confronted the unknown, and emerged wiser and more capable. The aliens had found refuge in allies, and humanity had learned the value of patience, communication, and moral responsibility. The world was forever changed, aware that the universe was vast, life beyond Earth existed, and survival depended on more than aggression. It depended on understanding, cooperation, and the courage to act wisely even in the face of fear. In the final moments, Dr. Elena Vasquez reflected on the journey, from the first discovery of the SOS signal to the chaotic initial encounters and finally to careful reconciliation and cooperation. Humanity had experienced the full spectrum of its strengths and weaknesses. She realized that survival, progress, and understanding were inseparable. The universe was no longer just a distant dream. It was a place of responsibility, challenge, and opportunity. Humanity had faced its test and had emerged, not perfect, but wiser, more compassionate, and prepared to continue exploring, understanding, and protecting life both on Earth and beyond.